Hello everyone. Welcome to the third in our series of our Wild Wednesday webinars. If this is the first time you've joined us, the previous two webinars addressed the arms of our Step Up for Wildlife appeal, which is our biggest ever appeal aimed at putting nature into recovery. So the arms of our appeal are bringing back our lost wildlife, creating nature recovery networks, putting nature at the heart of our communities and tackling the climate emergency. So looking for you today, I've got the lovely Kirsty Tyler with us here. She is our Nature and Wellbeing Communications Officer, and she'll be talking to us about putting nature at the heart of communities. Now, Kirsty works very closely with the Bay Service on Morecambe Bay, the Greenhouse Project at Witton Park, and various other services that we run to put nature and wellbeing in the thick of our work. So this webinar is being recorded. So if you have to leave us early or you have any technological issues or internet problems, don't worry. Over the next few days, you will receive an email with a link and you'll be able to watch it back. Feel free to share this and watch it with your friends and family. So the format for today is we will have about 40-minute presentation and chat with Kirsty about the work that we do to put nature at the heart of our communities, and then we will spend 15 minutes asking any questions and having a bit of a chat at the end. Laura is our technical wizard in the background. She's invisible, so you can't see her, but she is there to make sure that everything runs smoothly. She'll be having a look at your questions and making sure that they do get answered at the end of the session, and just making sure that all the technology runs smoothly. So I'm going to hand over to Kirsty now. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for attending this evening. It's great. So yeah, I'll just share my screen and then we can get started. Amy, does that look okay?
That looks fabulous.
Great. Okay, so yeah, as Amy was saying, I am the Nature and Wellbeing Communications Officer for Lancashire Wildlife Trust, and I work across a few different projects. We've got a Nature and Wellbeing service, which sort of encompasses quite a few areas in Lancashire and Manchester, and then we also have the Bay project, the Bay Blueprint for Recovery, which is based all around Morecambe Bay. So I'm just going to talk a bit I'm going to start off with a bit of sort of the history about why nature is so important to humans and sort of some of the reasons why we've lost a bit of the connection with nature and how we've lost a bit of our connection to our communities as well, and how we are trying to sort of tackle those two issues together in one thing. Has that moved on? Yep, great. So there's a couple of reasons why nature is so important to us. So for hundreds of thousands of years, Homo sapiens, along with other animals, really relied on nature just to survive. We needed to know what plants grew where, how herds migrated, what different weather could mean for our safety, and how to live when it was a bit leaner in like winter and things like that. The natural world is also where art first came from. It's thought that the first singing and dancing were due to people mimicking the mating rituals of animals, particularly birds, and they found it was a great way to express themselves by mimicking that behaviour. Without a connection to nature, no one would have ever thought that seeds from plants could be harvested and grown on a wider scale, or that we could, you know, have herds of animals for our own use. And you know, realization led to humans having much less nomadic lifestyle through the ages. That in turn led to, you know, us having settlements like villages and towns and cities. And that nature is still really important for farming. We still need pollinators and we still need things like worms for our soil health, and it's all a really important balance. And our health. We know that nature is excellent for both physical and mental well-being, and some studies have even hypothesized that there's a genetic reason for this, and that our DNA gives us a predisposition to feel connected to nature. So when we see nature, we immediately feel like calmer, and it just makes us feel good. So, how did we lose that wonderful connection with nature and, that feeling? Well, the agriculture that I mentioned before was really the start of how we lost that nature connection. And that was around 12,000 years ago. So no longer were we solely reliant on the earth, we'd made the earth work for us. But it's really in the last few hundred years or so that things have really exploded in the terms of us not needing that nature quite as much anymore. Around 1700 came the second agricultural revolution, and that saw farming yields suddenly skyrocket. Like what each worker was being able to make went up from about a 60% yield to 150%. And that meant that we needed a lot less farm labourers all of a sudden. And that is actually a reason why the Industrial Revolution, which is the next point, was so successful, because there was a huge amount of workforce that no longer had work on the farms. So they were ready to just go straight into the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution is really that point at which people began to really not just lose a connection with nature, but lose even sight of nature. And cities just suddenly started to boom in numbers. For example, Manchester grew from about 10,000 people in the early 1700s to nearly 2.5 million people in the early 1900s. And with that came things like poorer living conditions and all sorts of other problems, such as, crime and just losing that sense of community. And there's a lot of different ways in which we've also lost community through the ages. So that move from rural to urban living, as I said, that was a huge change in people's lives, going from these small rural communities where everyone lived in close proximity and helped each other out. And suddenly people were moving in droves to urban areas, particularly young people as well, which were, really key for rural communities. And the conditions in the cities wasn't great. They were dirty, they were smoky. Like I said, they were filled with crime. So people ended up being a lot more isolated. Moving on from that, we then had two world wars. So that had an impact on all sorts of communities as well. Many young men not returning from war or returning to vastly different communities than they had left. Women having stepped up in their absence to fill the void of workers and things. The country took a long time to recover from all of these changes, and many people became quite isolated in a post-war Britain. Looking at the loss of community, jumping ahead a bit, we go to the 1980s with the pit closures of the coal mines, and we're seeing huge job losses in very small towns, with pretty much the whole community all of a sudden losing all of their jobs, and therefore the communities around those pits also changing a lot and becoming very deprived as well. And, things like in the 70s and 80s, we also saw big changes to tourism. Flights to mainland Europe became cheaper than ever, and that became a massive decline for coastal communities, which we'll talk a bit more about later with the work we're doing in the Bay. But that decrease in tourism, really impacted a lot of people's lives around the coast. And more recently, we've got things like the rise of the internet and e-commerce, which has seen a lot of closures to our high streets. And it's, you walk down a lot of high streets these days and you will see, various shops boarded up. And, those high streets used to be a big hub of communities in the bigger towns and stuff. And it used to be where you'd see people and where you'd go out. And without those shops, there's no kind of reason to go to those places anymore. So that's changed things as well. And then, of course, on top of all of that, more recently, we've got COVID, which has impacted a lot of people. So During COVID, loneliness and isolation kind of became normal for us all. When lockdown happened, we were all isolated in our houses. We couldn't see our friends and family anymore. And, for many people, the effects continued even after lockdown finished. And there was a lot of fear about going outside, mixing with other people. And for some people, this even developed into, quite severe agoraphobia, where you just have a fear of going out of the house because, you don't know what's out there. Are there germs? Are people being careful? And that really affected a lot of people. And then there's also the loss and grief that came with COVID. So, not just the more obvious grief for people that we lost during COVID, but also the grief of those months lost and the experiences, the weddings, the birthdays, for kids, the time at school and things like that, that we all sort of lost together. So, it's unsurprising that we all felt a great sense of loss and grief from COVID, even if we didn't individually know someone that, passed away from it or anything. So, nature is really good for us, and it's also really good for communities to have access together to nature. Urban green spaces are well recognised for being really good for all of us. They're great for children whose physical and mental development is enhanced by living, playing, and learning in green environments. And also, the elderly also benefit significantly from visiting green and blue spaces, also improving physical health and social well-being. The World Health Organization actually recommends that all people reside within 300 meters of a green space, which, many people don't. And, that's something that really could be improved around the world. So access to green spaces also reduces inequalities. So by accessing high quality green space, it maximizes health and well-being benefits for people in cities, especially for people who have historically had great barriers to health due to that socio-economic status. And by involving local communities in different places with designing and managing their own green space, it's found to foster a sense of ownership and promote use of these places. And it gives people pride in their surroundings. And things like that can really reduce things like crime rates and antisocial behaviour. And actual studies in the US have found that housing projects, which are similar to our sort of council house areas, they really did lower the crime rates around those places, which is really interesting to see how green space can benefit society. So, how can we start to connect again with both people and nature? Well, that could be with working together for a common goal. That could be through volunteering. Obviously, Wildlife Trust have a lot of volunteers. It could just be coming to like a one-off event. So, things like coming to maybe our Files Sand Dunes Christmas tree planting projects and things like that, really feeling like you're part of a bigger picture. Can make you feel connected with all of those other people who are working. You feel then connected to the project which you've been working on, and you feel connected with the nature that you're helping as well. Education, and not just for kids either. So educating people about why the nature on their doorstep is as important as the sort of poster animals like pandas and blue whales, and making sure it's fostering a love for their own home, and making sure that that education is accessible and doesn't feel sort of like a lecture. Making people feel involved in the learning is really important as well. And the people first approach, using nature as a way to help people, is something that we've been doing at Lancashire Wildlife Trust for 8 years now with our wellbeing projects. And For a lot of people, it has been their very first steps into nature and conservation. And that first step has led to things like them getting involved with more volunteering or even becoming employed in the sector eventually, which is really great. And communications and messaging. Obviously, I am a communications officer, so what I do is communicate about nature and well-being, but also, nature in general. And it's more than just the physical interactions we have. It's how we tell the world what we're doing. It's a key part in fostering that connection, and making sure that people are seeing what we're doing and seeing the passion that, a lot of people who work at the trust have and really put out there every day. So, like I said, educating people without being prescriptive, and without lecturing is an important thing. And as I said, for a lot of people, the well-being stuff we do is really an introduction and a first step into nature and conservation. And an important part of this is meeting people where they're at. So everyone's got their own journey through nature. Some people will come in with a bit more experience, and some people will come in with no experience. They've never had an interest in nature before, and they, maybe they're very isolated and things like that. So we really need to meet them where they're at. During COVID, one of the ways which we did this was working with teens and actually doing sessions using the video game Minecraft. So the sessions involved actually creating some of our nature reserves in Minecraft. So they would make like rock holes and things like that. And that helped people because it introduced them to the reserves in a way that they were comfortable with, so that after COVID, they would feel more comfortable with actually visiting that place in person. And hopefully they'd also already have some friends from playing these video games together that they could all do that together. Helping people to get to where they need to be is important as well. Especially with the wellbeing service, it's difficult sometimes for people to know how to get somewhere and to know, you know, to feel confident in that as well. So with the wellbeing service, we send out videos introducing who people will be talking to. So before they even get a phone call from us, they've already received a video with our from our admin officers explaining who they are. So when they get that phone call, they already have a little bit of a connection with that person. And we also help them to figure out how to get to sessions. We'll pay for travel up to a certain point, and we've even started doing videos on how to actually get to some of our sessions that are a little bit more difficult or where people might feel a little bit more nervous. Sorry, just going to drink some water. Sometimes meeting people where they're at is actually about weaving that nature messaging into a community that already exists, which we've been doing a lot with our work in Blackburn with Darwin at the Greenhouse Project. So there we work with all sorts of groups and places, such as local mosques and Ukrainian and Syrian refugee groups. So, these groups are already set up, and then by working with them, we can start helping them to gain that connection with nature and for that community to have a connection with nature as a whole. Like I said, for many people, the nature and wellbeing service in particular has been the beginning of a relationship with nature, and so much so that I recently heard this wonderful statistic that now 6% of Lancashire Wildlife Trust employees actually started off their nature journey in this way, which is really lovely to know that people have come in at point zero of the nature connection and now feel connected enough that they want to actually work in that sector. It's great. And then we also utilise arts as well. So we've been doing a lot of different work with the Wordsworth Trust up in Cumbria to work on creative writing and poetry. We've done a lot of different art projects as well, and it helps people to just really connect with the world in a different way, and to be able to notice what's going on around them, when something they might not usually look at in great detail. So, a different group of people that we're about to start working with a bit more is farmers on the West Pennine Moors. So, we're doing a lot of work at the moment around the West Pennine Moors, and it's spanning across quite a few different teams throughout the Trust. A big part of that is making sure that we're connecting with these farmers who probably spend more time on that land than anyone else, and understanding what's going on with their lives and what concerns they might have around the conservation we're doing and how we can work together is a really important part of that. And it's a two-sided relationship as well. We know that farmers are struggling massively. Finances are a massive problem. Sometimes they're not able to, sell what they make, like what they're farming, and this is having a horrific outcome on the mental health of farmers. It's a very isolated life, and I was reading a report about it the other day, and the statistics about mental health in farmers was actually quite shocking. It's really, really shocking how bad farmers are finding things at the moment. So if we can use the experience we've got to work with them for the best outcome for both people and nature, then that is a win for both parties, and something that we're really looking forward to sort of helping with in that area. So, obviously, we're trying to connect everyone with nature, we're trying to connect everyone with each other, and that goes through sort of all age ranges, really. So, we do a lot of different ways in which we do this. So for children, we have things like toddle together walks at Brock Hole. So they're really good at introducing little ones to nature. And they have the added bonus of providing connection for parents and carers of young children at all. Because it can sometimes be difficult, especially as a new parent, to meet other people and sort of have a connection when you've got a little baba. Nature Tots is an educational program for kids from 15 months old to 5 years old, and that gets them interacting with nature through play, as well as developing other skills ahead of school and connecting with other kids. So it's fostering some really important developmental stuff, as well as giving them a really early connection with nature. And as a trust, obviously, we run a lot of forest school training, which, as well as fostering that love of connecting with nature, it also gives kids a valuable outlet from traditional classroom-based learning, which really, especially some kids who don't thrive in a classroom, it can really help with their learning and give them a nice balanced education. And all of these are designed to really get kids interested from an early age and keep that connection to nature fostered as they grow. And then we continue with teens and young adults. So our wellbeing service, you might have heard it called My Place in the past if you follow Lancashire Wildlife Trust at all. And that actually started off, My Place actually stands for Motivated Younger People Looking After Community Environments. So that was where it all started off in 2016 as a wellbeing service for young people. It can be a difficult age to work with. We're having to compete with friends, hormones, peer pressure, increased schoolwork, the pressure of GCSEs and A levels. It can be quite a difficult age to work with, but it is needed for them to have that support and, look after their well-being and things. And something a bit different sometimes does work really well. So we do a lot more adult stuff now with My Place, but we still run our dirt work sessions, which are on Saturdays, and those are for 11 to 24 years old. So it does cover quite a wide age range, and people mix with different people. One of the most amazing things I think that we do in the trust is our youth council. We've got really wonderful young people who represent us, help us with, decision making. They go down to London and present things at Parliament all the time. They did talks at COP26. They're an incredible, passionate group of young people, and it really is wonderful because it does help young people to have other young people, to seeing other young people get involved will help more young people to get involved. So that really helps with that connection for a different group of people. So it's really amazing to have these incredibly inspiring young people working with us so closely. And I think especially, decisions are being made now countrywide, especially with the upcoming general election, that are affecting their future. So it's great to be able to represent their opinions and things. And then with adults, we have, the things that you would expect, sort of volunteering, which you can do on like a weekly basis. And people do end up with new friends and communities and things like that. And then, as I already mentioned, our File Sand Dunes project earlier with the Christmas tree planting. So there's bigger volunteering opportunities that people can get involved with, and they can feel part of something huge, which, it's quite exciting. We do regular events, and getting people along to different things. So for example, at Christmas last year we held a Christmas fair at Brockholes, and why that doesn't necessarily feel like a massively like wildlife trust conservation event, it's appealing to a different group of people who then have engaged with us and might come back for a walk around Brockholes on a different day, or they might start to get involved in some different conservation events and stuff. So we can engage people in different ways to depending on what their interests are. We do all sorts of talks with different groups as well, like Rotary, Women's Institute, local parish groups, all sorts of people about different bits of work we're doing, so we can go out and engage with people. And then we've also got sort of our business partners, corporate partners who support us, but also usually want to make their workplaces a bit greener and have staff more involved in getting out there and doing some conservation activities. So I've already talked a bit about our Nature and Wellbeing Service. This map just shows, oh, maybe this map doesn't show anything. Amy, can you see that? Oh. Is that map working? Okay, maps.
The map isn't there, I'm afraid.
The map isn't there. Okay, never mind. So basically, as I said, we work around Morecambe Bay, and then we've got a lot of Greater Manchester and Lancashire that we work in. So that's just what was on that map, but it's not integral at all, don't worry. So nature and wellbeing. I'll just have another drink, sorry. So our Nature and Wellbeing Service is really structured around the 5 ways to wellbeing. And you'll come across these in most sort of mental health / wellbeing programs. And they are learn, take notice, connect, give back, and be active. And we do these in various ways, like we might do nature walks, we might do some citizen science. So sometimes that'll be something like a pollinator survey, where you go and you put a quadrant on the ground and see what comes in like 10 minutes in that quadrant. So that's definitely, taking notice. And it's also giving back, because that will go into a science program. We do some things like bushcraft as well, teaching people skills and different things like that. And our wellbeing services, you can self-refer or be referred by a health professional for those. So people can just fill out a form themselves if they want to come. They don't have to wait to go and talk to a GP or anything. They can just refer themselves, or, the health professionals can also do it, which is great if people don't already know about it. We were lucky enough to be part of one of 7 test and learn sites throughout England for green social prescribing, working alongside and with other organisations like Incredible Edible, Berry Woodworking Group, and Friends of Phillips Park. And We ran the referrals for that, but people had a range of options, not just our nature and wellbeing groups, for getting outside. So we could really work with what people needed and what was best for each person, which is the main thing about getting someone that nature connection. Like I said, you've got to meet them where they are. And there was a report last year that actually said if wellbeing services like ours were rolled out nationally, then the impact that would have on both mental and physical health and the resulting decrease in NHS inpatient admissions, accident and emergency attendances, and outpatient appointments would save approximately £635.6 million per year. And that part is just the saving for the NHS. That doesn't take into account things like the gains for wildlife, biodiversity, clean water, and flood prevention, as well as greater access to natural places for the wider community. And through our wellbeing work, we've also been working with some of the hardest to reach people in society to give them a connection to nature. So, for example, we've been working with inpatients at a young person's mental health ward for quite a few years now. We work with early intervention teams. So, early intervention teams work with people who are at risk of or in the early stages of psychosis. So, they might be sort of having hallucinations or sort of hearing voices and things like that. And it really helps to just quieten that brain a bit and just help them to feel a little bit more better. We've taken activities into nursing homes and dementia wards, and we've even worked at an approved premises with people who have just got out of prison to help with their rehabilitation. So, really making sure that as many people as possible have access to nature-based activities. So as Amy said, I also work with the Greenhouse Project, which is just one arm of our wellbeing offer. So the Greenhouse Project has been really excellent for sort of showcasing our work and getting a different group of people involved in stuff. We've ended up with some really great relationships with the local Muslim community, and often this can be a group that aren't hugely involved with conservation or like horticulture things. And now it's so involved that we've held like in this year alone, we've held 4 iftar events, I think, during Ramadan. And that includes a nature walk, followed by prayer and then breaking fast all together at the Greenhouse Project. So you've got that really lovely community, just all spending time together, but also having that little bit of nature walk before everything else that they'd normally do in an iftar event. There's a really wonderful solid group of volunteers now at the Greenhouse Project who come week in, week out. They barely ever miss one, and they've developed their own community. They've got friends. They see each other every week. They see each other's lows and highs, and it is really, really beautiful. And the great thing about that is that the volunteers have a sense of ownership of the greenhouse because they've been involved through, some of them have been there for years, so they've been involved in the whole restoration process over the past couple of years, and they feel like it's their space. We're also about to start working with our peatlands team to grow sphagnum moss at the Greenhouse Project, which is also brilliant because it will connect the volunteers at the Greenhouse Project with the wider body of work on the West Pennine Moors, and give them a sense of, the wider landscape which Blackburn with Darwen sits in. So that's really great as well. And a big part of the Greenhouse Project obviously is growing food. We work a lot with Blackburn with Darwen Food Alliance for that, and that's about connecting people with where their food comes from. So the Greenhouse Project produces food, obviously, but it also helps to add the nature part into that conversation. And then another arm of the wellbeing things we do is the bay. So I already talked about, the sort of deprivation experienced by coastal communities due to the changes in things like tourism. And we've also mentioned COVID. So the bay really came out of both of those things. So during COVID, a lot of coastal communities became real ghost towns. Like despite a lot of the tourism from these towns having already declined, the main industry still is hospitality. And, if you're in Morecambe looking down Marine Road, it is hotels, it's arcades, it's restaurants, and, all of that had to very suddenly shut and, either had to furlough staff or let them go. So in 2021, Lancashire Wildlife Trust partnered with Cumbria Wildlife Trust, the Eden Project, due to their increased work in the area ahead of Eden Project Morecambe, and also Lancashire and South Cumbria NHS Foundation Trust. So the project was planned in a slightly different way to our existing wellbeing service, and this was based on 3 different strands of work to try and reach the most people in the best way possible. So at the top, we have specialist, which is the wellbeing sessions, just like the ones we do with the what was previously My Place, so the LGBT Nature and Wellbeing service. So many things like what we've always done, but in a slightly different habitat of, having that coastal sort of feel to it. Targeted is more of community events to connect people with nature, helping with nature's recovery, whilst also weaving some wellbeing work into that. So that's, people who maybe don't need that quite so small group stuff can come to a slightly bigger event. And then the whole population approach is providing people with ideas to go and engage with nature themselves and really self-serve. So sometimes that's just giving people ideas, providing sheets to just print off at home with things they can go do, like beach bingo and things like that. And producing videos with some information on and information about different species that they might find if they're out on a walk or anything. And it's not just that there's 3 strands, it's those 3 strands can also be the journey that people take through the bay. So coming to the specialist sessions, then they can increase the confidence and feel like they can go on to events and start giving back a bit more with things like volunteering, and then eventually can also self-serve, which may also include them getting involved with other conservation organisations and projects. For example, one of our participants has now started volunteering with the National Coastwatch Institution at Fleetwood, and that's not something they perhaps would have come across if it wasn't for attending our wellbeing sessions and sort of being in the same space as that. So why do we do all of this? Aren't we a wildlife conservation charity and not a people charity? Well, yes. But as we all know, for nature's recovery, we need to get 1 in 4 people taking action for nature. And that is a big number. That is bigger than people who are just normally interested in nature, the people who have always been a birder or have done ecology at university or what have you. And the biggest change we can make is to help people begin that journey towards nature and help them to continue it, and giving them accessible ways in which to engage with nature and make sure that they want to continue with that journey into nature, because it's not scary and it doesn't feel too much like being on a school field trip or in a science class, and it's not filled with complicated Latin names for all of the wildlife. It's helping people to see the beauty of what's just outside their front door. And not just the beauty, because some nature is pretty weird looking. It's helping them understand the importance of it and how to help it recover. It's helping people to come together with good intentions for their neighbourhood, whether that's a beach, a park, a woodland, and it's empowering people. And that is the main point of a lot of what we do. We're empowering people, we're giving them a love for nature, we're giving them a love for their own home. And in return, they can start to help with nature's recovery. And that's it. If we'll be going on to questions shortly, but if you do have any questions after you've left the talk or anything, that's my email address. So do feel free to drop me an email.
Thank you so much, Kirsty. I really enjoyed that. I learned some things. So I hope that you appreciated the talk today and took some things from it that you might not have known before, or you're inspired to take action or check out our offers. I will give Kirsty an email. Thank you for your knowledge and your passion. So what I didn't mention at the beginning was that each of these webinars is actually it's been put on by us to share our knowledge, share our expertise, share our passions and experiences, and it's a pay-as-you-feel webinar. So if you would like to donate to our Step Up for Wildlife appeal, the link and the QR code is on the page there. Every single penny counts. If you think this webinar was worth £1 or £10, please donate. Each one of our webinars will address where your money is going to and the type of work that it supports, and we cannot do this work, this vital work, for people and the planet without you. So please do consider donating if you appreciated Kirsty's words of wisdom and our time today, and we appreciate your time, so thank you for joining us. The next webinar, the topic is tackling the climate emergency. That'll be hosted by, presented with Alex Hubbersty, and it's on Wednesday, the 26th of June, same time, same place as today. And thanks again for joining us. We've really appreciated your company. Now, questions. Do we have any questions? I can't see any coming through. Okie dokes. Well, I have a question for you. So I'm a bit familiar with some of the work that you do in your arm of the trust. But what I would like to know, obviously, mental health services are very much flourishing at a slower rate than we'd probably like. Where would you like to see these sort of offers and this sort of service in about 5 years' time? Where would you ideally, perfect world, magic wand, where would you like to see these services?
I mean, so obviously a lot of the work we do is we sort of have to jump from funding stream to funding stream. There's a lot of grant applications. It would be great if it was just, part of the NHS, or almost the natural health service rather than the National Health Service, maybe. It would be great if that was, completely rolled out across the whole of the UK. I think with the report I mentioned before, where it mentioned the £635 million saving, I think it was found that for every £1 invested into projects like ours, I think you sort of get £2.40 worth of savings. So you get out a lot more than you put in with projects like ours. So, it would be, if that could be funded, it would, like, fully funded forever. That would be really wonderful. I'd also like to see, I think I want to see sort of wellbeing work. It is getting more and more into all of the work we do, but I would like it to be more of a sort of core part of all the work we do across the trust, really, and see, wellbeing being tackled, whatever project people are working on, and maybe even giving our wellbeing groups just more freedom to go into different projects and do a bit of work in other places, maybe.
Perfect. That's a lovely answer. Thank you very much. We've not got any questions coming through, so I think that might be an appropriate time to wrap up the webinar. So you will get an email over the next couple of days with a link to watch back or share with friends and family. And again, please consider donating if you've considered this worthwhile. So I've been your presenter, Amy, and you've been listening to Kirsty Tyler. And thank you for joining us this evening. Have a lovely evening.
Thanks for coming, everyone.